I want to share some thoughts with you today about conflict. Not a subject we really like to talk about, but in reality, conflict affects all of us in our life. Wherever we meet together with other people or have shared experiences, it could be in a social club, in our home, in the workplace, at school, or even in the university, I can guarantee that we will have conflict of some sort or other. It might be small niggly things, or it might be larger big things that affect us. And Portsmouth University, as good as it is no exception. There are thousands and thousands of students gathering together, meeting in all sorts of environments, on courses together or socially, and there will be conflict. It sometimes is worse for us when we're in university than conflict in our normal setting, in our normal life experiences, because we're isolated from family and friends. We haven't got that support network around us, and those little things can grow in our mind and in our relationships, and can be really, really detrimental to university life. Conflict has been defined as the science of restoring and developing social capital, social discipline, emotional well-being and civic participation through participatory learning and decision making. I guess that could be summed up as saying it's a science of relationships and healthy relationships. There's a difference between restorative practices and mediation, or even punitive punishment. With punitive punishment or mediation, you can isolate people, you can overcome the conflict, but it does nothing to repair the damage in the relationships. Restorative, on the other hand, will both help to overcome the conflict, resolve the issues, but strengthen the relationships through going through that process. Often when we talk about conflict in restorative circles, we think about the pyramid of escalation. And right at the top there's really intense issues that have got out of hand. And restorative is often used in those situations, both with the judiciary, but in life, in families, in workplaces. But when we look down the pyramid, right at the bottom there, where most of our interactions take place, that's where the niggly little things start. And if they're not dealt with, they progress up the pyramid. In all of those levels, restorative skills and practices can help you deal with stuff and resolve it and stop it escalating and becoming more serious. And one of the simple skills used in restorative, which I'm going to just demonstrate to you now as a way of hopefully whetting your appetite to appreciate how easy it is a thing called iMessaging. Now, when I'm usually talking about iMessaging with students, they immediately think of text messages on their iPhones. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with using I instead of the statement you. So if I was annoyed with somebody maybe because I felt they'd ignored me during the day, I might say, you make me angry when you ignore me. If I do that, if I start with you make me angry, it's felt as an attack upon that person, which it is really. We're trying to blame them or shame them or make them feel guilty. And the trouble is when we do that, that releases chemicals in their brain, in the amygdala, which flood through the body and prepare us for a fight or flight or freeze response. The fight response, hopefully not fisticuffs or anything like that, would be another verbal response back to us, starting with a you message. Well, it's your fault. You should have spoken up, or you should have come over and spoken to me. I'm not here to look after you. You're old enough to do that yourself. That would then release chemicals in my brain which prepare me for a fight or flight or freeze response, and we suddenly get these you messages going backwards and forward. You did this, you said that, and it just gets worse and worse. And we begin to nurse it and rehearse it, and it grows within us. We start to think about it, and we start to talk to other people about it and blaming that person because they ignored me. On the other hand, if we use an iMessage, we can still make the statement, but we make it in a different way. We say, I get angry when I feel ignored. The difference there is that one, you're not pointing the finger at anybody, you're not creating that reaction within them, but you're expressing your feelings. And there's a wonderful thing that I discovered many years ago, and it's that thoughts produce feelings and feelings produce behaviour. That's quite a basic fundamental thing. I think if you spoke to anybody on the psychology courses, they would tell you the same. But there's another thing to do with expressing feelings that's really profound. In neuroscience, they found because of thoughts, the link between thoughts and feelings, if I'm expressing my feelings to somebody, and the neuroscience scientists was to put one of those caps on my head with lots of wires going to their computer and lots of electrodes measuring my neural activity, and they measured the neural activity of the person I was talking to when I was expressing my feelings, provided they were listening, it would be the same. And they call that mirror neural networks. And if the neural activity is the same, that means the thinking is becoming the same. And if the thinking becomes the same, the feelings become the same. And we actually create empathy. And that is really, really powerful. Different than sympathy, empathy is where they understand where you're coming from and feel the same as you do. Some students in the business course this year came on a placement looking at restorative practices, and they did a survey in Portsmouth University and other universities to see what were the two most common causes of conflict. And the two common causes were lack of cleanliness and poor hygiene. Amazing, isn't it? It's those little things that annoy us more and more, and those things that we can't change in somebody, but we experience the consequences of that. So imagine that one morning you're perhaps in shared accommodation with some people, or it might be in the communal spaces in the halls of residence, and you get up early because you've got a little job that you're doing. You go to the kitchen and it's left in a mess. You can't make your toast or tea or coffee without clearing up beforehand. And the person who was on the rota to clean last night didn't do it, and you say to them, you made me late this morning because you didn't wash up last night, so I spent 15 minutes cleaning up before going out. I can guarantee that that's going to cause even more conflict. However, to say, I get annoyed when the kitchen is left in a mess, and it can make me late for my meetings, will actually get some empathy and generate a conversation amongst the people involved on how to overcome that problem and not do that again. Another one of the common skills that I want to show you is the use of what we call the restorative questions, the 5 restorative questions. All these questions can be used as statements. And imagine that you see conflict between two of your friends. They might be on the same course, they might be living in the same accommodation, or they might be part of a team you're working with as a project on your course. And there's some conflict, and you want to help them to resolve that. Never assume that you know what the cause of that conflict is, even though you might have seen them shouting or making nasty remarks or whatever it may be. Always ask what happened from their perspective, because often there is a backstory. It might not just be what you've witnessed. There might be some history there between the people involved, or it might be a backstory to do with their home life or their personal life. They've just had some bad news or things are not working correctly. Always ask. That's very cathartic for the person to know that they're being listened to and not judged. Then ask them those questions: what were you thinking at the time and how were you feeling? Because remember, thoughts produce feelings which produce actions. In discussing their thinking, the thinking might have been wrong, and it's only in discussing that can the thinking change, which will then change their feelings. But if the thinking is right, when they talk about their feelings, mirror neural networks again, for the other people involved, when you hear how it's affected somebody, that can create empathy. And then who's been affected by this? Conflict is never in isolation between 2 or 3 people. Even if there was nobody there, nobody else there at the time, I can guarantee that those involved will talk to their friends, or talk to their family, or talk to their flatmates or housemates about it. Because we want to get some sympathy. We want to know they're on our side. We want to claim our righteousness. It wasn't my fault, it was their fault. And as we do that, that has an effect on them. What they hear will affect them. And we call that the ripple effect. So in talking about who's been affected by our actions and our words and what we've done, again helps to create empathy and understanding and motivate us to want to repair things. And then finally, to all those who are involved, what do you need to do to put things right? Not what does he need to do, but what do I need to do? What can I do to help put things right and make them better? And when we go through that process, there is growth that comes out of that. Emotional growth. We become more aware of other people's feelings. We become more concerned about them than just about ourselves. But there's a strengthening and a bonding that takes place by having that shared experience and together finding resolve to it. And when you're doing your course, if you have any teams and work together as a team, there will be, or potentially will be, conflict in the team. It might be over lateness, about who's taking responsibility for whatever. I suggest that what you do is what we call a restorative circle. Just sit people in a circle with no tables or chairs or distractions in the way. Or it might be with your flatmates or friends who you've had conflict with. Get in this circle in a quiet space and just raise the issue, and then go round the room, getting people to take turn in talking about what's happened from their perspective, how they were feeling and what they were thinking when that happened, who's going to be affected by that, and what can be done to put things right. I guarantee that will make your team and your friendships a lot stronger. Google did a survey a couple of years ago across all the Google empire, trying to discover what were the best characteristics in the good teams, were the common characteristics. And they took into consideration all sorts of things like finances, location where people were living, the type of work they were doing, the environment they worked in. And the 2 things they found were common in the best teams was that each person felt they had equal rights in talking in a relaxed communication, conversational way, not structured, very informal, and that each member of the team was more intuitively aware of the other team members' emotions. They call that the Eureka Project. Those results were so profound. Those are the results that we get when we apply restorative practices and restorative circles. So I would encourage you that when you come to the university, or if you're already here, that if you have problems, look to get help. There are trained people in the university, in the chaplaincy team, in the wellbeing team. There's assorted students in the sorted team who will be willing to help you. But also, if you feel that you'd like to get some more training yourself, speak to your lecturers or speak to people who know something about restorative, and they will put you in touch with people like myself or other people who will be willing to train you and give you those skills, because these are skills for life. They're not just for university, they are for life's experiences in the workplace, in the home, in our social life. And I hope that your experience in Portsmouth University is as conflict-free as possible. Thank you.